My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
In the wake of the Naga and the horrors of the night before, Feyre and Tamlin escape to secret glens and galleries. Calanmai approaches, and with it the responsibilities of the High Lord that put Feyre and Tamlin at odds. Feyre begins to open herself up to the possibility of falling for Tamlin as new threats start to reveal themselves.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we are exploring Sarah J. Maas's most controversial novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
This week, we're discussing chapters 18 through 22 in A Court of Thorns and Roses. This week, we ask ourselves, how do these characters deal with responsibilities and accountability?
Also, who wants control and who has control?
Themes that we're definitely going to be seeing are sex and all the messy consequences that come with it.
We also look at defining identity, and that can mean sexual identity, how responsibility defines identity, and identity in relationships. As we head into chapter 18, we see Feyre and Tamlin in the aftermath of the death of the fairy. And I think this is an important point for Feyre and her growth because she's learning to cope with death.
As if she's never had to learn how to cope with death before. Sorry, that was shitty. That did not come out that way. I meant like she does continue to learn to cope with death because it never ends.
Right. It never ends. And I think it's the first time that she has had compassion for another living being that is not something she's had to hunt, that is like herself, right? And so that is a hard transition for her. And so what does she do? She escapes. She needs to be in nature and around color, and that is her coping mechanism. And we see that as Tamlin takes her to his secret glen. She observes things the way she observes everything when it comes to painting. She describes the water was still enough that the vibrant sky and fat, puffy clouds above were flawlessly reflected. Asking about them seemed vulgar after last night, but maybe once those paints and brushes did arrive, I could venture to the pool to capture it.
I love that she also calls out that it's vulgar, that they're going on this sweet little outing the day after.
Yeah, so she's very self-aware in that moment, but goes along with it.
I mean, she didn't know the fairy. It's fine.
And at the end of the day, she's the one still alive. How else are you going to deal with something that traumatic?
Yeah, this is definitely a grabbing the life by the horns after witnessing a traumatic death.
So she goes on to describe the pool and the glen as the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, as if the colors and lights and patterns of the world had come together to form one perfect place, one true bit of beauty. After last night, it was exactly where I needed to be. It's interesting to me that her color appreciation and her light appreciation has started to advance into texture appreciation as well. We see that in the previous chapter as well when she describes the texture of the fairy's skin. She describes the texture of the grass and she catalogs its color. And I think that's because she's opening up her senses to these things more and more and drawing herself away from being the hunter.
Hunters are way more open to their senses in different ways. They have to be aware with different types of things. And now she gets to have the senses of a painter.
It speaks to her feeling of safety, which is important for her relationship with Tamlin.
Well, it's part of like your earlier question of the idea of identity. And for Feyre, being the painter means so many different things for her. Embracing it kind of like introduces new areas about herself that she doesn't even realize.
And it's interesting that it takes death for her to get to that point. I think it's also important that Feyre's awakening senses is also opening her up to her sexuality because now she's in a comfortable space where she can be a sexual being again. We see this when she romanticizes the breeze. She describes it as the air was warm and mild, and a soft breeze kissed its way across my bare stomach, like a lover.
I think it's important to remember the way that Feyre used to describe sex with Isaac. She was hungry, and it was all she could get. It was an escape.
And this is not hungry. This is very sensual. It's very much what you think your first time would be. I made a note that this is followed immediately by Tamlin stripping her with his gaze and then literally stripping his own clothes off.
Staring at each other while they undress. It's so uncomfortable. But like at the same time, when you're reading it, it's definitely...
Oh, it's hot.
It's so hot. It's so hot. Even as she describes her underwear as modest, she was like, it covers everything.
I mean, that's the only way you could make it realistic, right?
Yeah, like that's the day you happen to be wearing your period underwear or something.
Right, exactly.
And like you're saggy.
Like, oh, it's okay. It's like wearing a swimsuit. What I love about this pool scene, and I did not notice it, of course, until after having read the whole series and then going back to read this book, the pool is described as starlit or starlight. And we see Tamlin and Feyre swim in it. I would like to suggest that Tamlin swimming in the pool is him disguising himself as someone that Feyre should fall in love with.
Feyre says it's like starlight, and Tamlin says it is starlight. So what do we represent with starlight and stars and night? Rhysand. I can see how him dipping into that is coding himself with something that she should desire or want to be with.
And we've seen throughout this book on multiple occasions that she has this affinity for stars and night. Just like the arrow when she was fighting the Naga, Rhys is present here.
Just like Rhys is present with absolutely everything that happens with them romantically.
Oh, yeah.
Before he even shows up.
It's true. He is marking his territory. That is what is happening here. What's interesting is that Tamlin takes this starlight for himself in more than one way. Not only is he swimming in the starlight pool, Feyre also observes that the starlight dances in his or Tamlin's eyes as he said, "What would be enough to make you happy? What about the ringing of bluebells, or a ribbon of sunshine, or a garland of moonlight?" Bluebells, sunshine, moonlight. Those are very, very intentional selections.
Oh, yeah.
To me, they represent the various homes and families that Feyre has or will have. So the bluebells, think about all the flowers that she painted in the cabin. So it's her birth family, the cabin, which she hated. Sunshine obviously represents Tamlin because he's described as the sun and, you know, wheat and all these bright things, right? And then the moonlight, of course, is Rhys. It's funny that he offers her all these things when he's in no place to offer these things to her. It's
crazy because it's in the actual progression, too, of her family, then Tamlin, then Rhysand.
Yeah. And I think that's a very intentional thing on Sarah J. Maas's part to signal that she's going to go through these phases.
I love hearing you talk about the Starlight Pond because it's very clear in the, you know, when you're rereading it, just thinking, oh my God, they're in Starlight Pond, it's Rhysand. But there are several notes here that I also felt like were important to look at. One, it's the way that they entered the pond, which was extremely significant to me. I will quote on page 159, "He let go of me to leap over the root of the tree in a single maneuver and prowled to the water's edge. I could only grind my teeth as I stumbled after him, heaving myself over." He's both showing off that he's more powerful than her and showing that she's nothing as they get to this Starlight Pond. And he kind of taunts her oh, do you want to go in? You don't want to go in. Haha, I know you're too afraid. And she takes him up on that challenge, and she's the first one to go into that pond. Then it's like, then you start thinking about like, okay, well, what does the pond represent? We know what it represents for Feyre. It represents Rhysand. But when Tamlin says later on that this place was his favorite haunt as a boy, it's an interesting reminder that Tamlin and Rhysand used to be friends. And Rhysand was almost like an older brother to Tamlin because he was older and he fought at the war. For Tamlin, the starlight is also significant because Rhysand was his favorite haunt as a boy. They were friends.
I forget that Tamlin and Rhysand were friends.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's a really interesting point, that they actually share this, or they will share this connection. But ultimately, even though here it brings them together, it is what drives them apart later on.
It drives them apart later on. And even when Feyre asks what happens if you drink the water, and Tamlin says, legend claims you'll be happy until your last breath. There's a lot of death surrounding Feyre and Rhysand. And so the saying that you'll be happy until your last breath, once you embrace the starlight inside you, Sarah J. Maas knows what she's doing with this. She's pulling our heartstrings and we don't even know what's happening.
I think this scene is important for their relationship as well, not just this Rhysand element, but we also see them coming together and unburdening themselves. Together they leave the warrior behind and they feel safe enough to talk. Feyre in particular feels safe enough to talk about her past because she projects that there are these parallels between their experiences. Mm-hmm. Tamlin makes a point to remark that she doesn't speak like a peasant. So he's figured out that her family was rich, they've lost the fortune, and this surprises her. And by doing this, he acknowledges in front of her that he is observant of her and thoughtful of her. But really, if you pay attention to this conversation, he never gives any information about himself. Mm-hmm. It's only him extracting information from her. There's this imbalance in their relationship, but Feyre takes it and sees it as a moment to be cherished in their connection.
How many times do we see this over and over again where information is used as power against Feyre? Be it with the curse, be it with the rules of the Fey Kingdom, and now here with Tamlin extracting that information, it's power equals information, and she doesn't have any of that.
And we're going to see that throughout the next few chapters too. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I think is important to note here also is that Feyre's compassion is an important tool for her assimilation in the fairy world. Mm. And we see time and time again that her compassion for those unlike her buys her loyalty and devotion. So
oh my God, you're right. We see that in the second book too.
Yeah.
With all the water creatures.
Yeah, we see it everywhere.
Which is the most human thing about her that people keep pointing out.
Right. That's a very unfairy-like thing that she needs to get over that, but she holds on to that piece of herself. Mm-hmm. The way she treats the dying Fae woos Tamlin, obviously. He takes her to his favorite glen afterward. But it also is important for her and Lucian's relationship. Because not only has he witnessed this, he also remarks to Feyre that Tamlin told him that her first shot against the Naga was actually to save the Suriel's life. It wasn't to harm the Naga. And he recognizes he's acted with less honor than Feyre has, and as a result, feels like he owes her an apology.
Which he never quite does.
Oh, no.
Instead, he gives her the apology Feyre probably would want, which is a weapon.
Something that's actually useful to her.
I love, though, that the weapon that he gives her is a bedazzled dagger, essentially. It's a super shiny dagger with super shiny, pretty killing powers. And I think I mentioned this before in previous episodes, but Tamlin, who has these very serious armor and weapons always on him, and he never uses it. And then you have Feyre with her pretty shiny dagger, and she goes and uses that bad boy later.
I think it speaks to their dynamic under the mountain, right? He has weapons that should be used that are never used, and she has weapons that shouldn't be used, but she uses them.
Yep.
And we're going to see that reiterated in this episode a couple times in a couple different ways. So moving on into chapter 19, we have what I call the seduction of Feyre Archeron.
It's sexy time.
It's sexy time.
It just gets really horny from here on out.
Let's start with the beginning, which is Feyre is charmed by bare minimum effort. She is so horny, anything will make her hot and bothered.
Yeah, please read the quote because we laughed. We had a good laugh about this.
We did. Okay, on page 167, the marble floors shone so brightly that they had to have been freshly mopped, and that rose-scented breeze floated in through the opened windows. All this, he'd done this for me, as if I would have cared about cobwebs or dust.
He asked his servants to clean up the place.
Oh yeah, he didn't do any of this himself.
He's not out there mopping and dusting, Feyre. Like, how? I can't believe he asked other people to do this for him. He's so sweet. Yeah, I mean, asking other people to clean for you is quite literally the bare minimum. Also, can't say I'm angry about it if someone had someone else clean something for me, but it's a good call out that Feyre's standards have always been so low that bare minimum gets those panties dropping.
When you think about who she lived with prior to this, like her father and sisters,
Yep.
it makes sense. But come on, girl.
Try a little harder.
She's at a point where she's falling for Tamlin, so she continues to create situations where she will just continue to fall for him, if that makes sense. Because of that, she keeps projecting onto him. Tamlin remarks to her, "It's been a long time since there was anyone here who appreciated these things. I like seeing them used again." Feyre then observes, "Especially when there was such blood and death in every other part of his life." We're going to see this multiple times, but I feel like he, in her mind, is a blank canvas, and she's painting her thoughts onto him.
The projection that she is putting onto him.
And she does it a lot. I think I just accepted it the first time I read the book because it was an audiobook.
Well, and it's all first person.
Right.
So we trust the author. I mean,
or we trust the narrator.
The narrator. Yeah, sorry. And I trusted Sarah J. Maas here for this too. But I mean, like, that's also when you are writing in first person, the narrator is that close to the reader. Everything they say tends to become gospel, and you believe it because you're not questioning it because you're getting this one source of information from their voice.
One thing I think that you can trust is that at this point in time, Feyre is undergoing some changes, and we see this change in her reflected in the art in the gallery. Feyre is now able to see things from a perspective different than chapter 1 Feyre. She is able to have compassion for the things she thinks she's supposed to hate, and this is reflected in the art in the gallery. On page 168, it reads, "Some had been painted through eyes like mine, artists who saw in colors and shapes I understood. Some showcased colors I had not considered. These had a bend to the world that told me a different set of eyes had painted them, a portal into the mind of a creature so unlike me, and yet I looked at its work and understood and felt and cared." I love this for Feyre, but at the same time, I feel like Tamlin's using it against her.
You make a good point. Her eyes are opening. She's seeing the world is much larger than she even realizes and is open to that. And yet her world has also become much more narrow. I mean, if you think about her life in the cabin, she could go into the forest. She could go wherever she wanted. She wasn't trapped anywhere. And although she's quote unquote not trapped there, she is confined to the house because it's too dangerous outside. So on one level, wow, I understand so much more. On the other level, pretty bird in a golden cage.
Exactly. All her needs are being met. And so there's no need for her to venture outside anymore. This is just one of those ways that Tamlin is seducing her or entrapping her. Feyre even recognizes, "I stayed for hours, stayed until I was drunk on the art, until I was dizzy with hunger and wandered out to find food." There's a quote later on, but I'm going to quote it now. She is gulping this down like fairy wine. She just is eating it up, and Tamlin is taking advantage by giving her what she wants or what she thinks she wants. As this seduction continues to take place, Feyre is now adopting a persona a little bit different than what we know for her. She is starting to mirror Tamlin. We see this in a couple different ways. When she laughs because of Tamlin, the connotation of the words used to describe her laugh are associated with an animal and with sunlight.
Oh, good point. I think the quote you're looking at is like, "I tipped back my head and howled, my laughter like sunlight, shattering age-hardened glass." Like, I didn't even catch that, where howled like Tamlin's beast and sunlight like Tamlin's spring court are now being used to describe her.
Yeah, and this is right after Tamlin gives her the dirty limericks instead of love poems, which also, dirty limericks instead of love poems.
You wrote, "Discuss."
There's a reason Sarah J. Maas chose dirty limericks over poems.
There's also a reason why you have this like kind of a grand gesture, larger of a gesture, more humor than we've ever seen from Tamlin. And it masks it in a way that we're charmed by it. This is probably one of the most charming things that he's actually done. His personality is starting to shine through. He's more than just a brooding Fey male. But as we see in Rhysand in book 2, he actually teaches Feyre how to read versus using it as a weapon against her, both as a, I know more than you and I'm going to charm you with my wit.
He's using his knowledge to seduce her rather than using his knowledge to improve her or give her what she really wanted, which was to learn how to read. There's nothing wrong with being charmed by a man who writes you dirty limericks. I just feel
we're not against that here. Feel free to send us dirty limericks.
I just feel like if he can't read, he needs to change his priorities. We continue to see this idea of Feyre and Tamlin mirroring each other, and Feyre even calls it out. On page 177, she says, perhaps his generosity, his kindness, was a reaction to that. Perhaps he'd seen me and found it to be like gazing into a mirror of sorts. Again, she's projecting. Mm-hmm. She's making assumptions. Tamlin calls himself a warrior beast, and in that moment, Feyre remembers that Nesta called Feyre a half-wild beast.
I hate when Tamlin associates himself with the warrior, because he's not a warrior.
How much of what he's doing to make him seem like he and Feyre are two sides of the same coin, how much of it is a manipulation on his part?
Oh, I mean, 100%. When he even talks about, I believe it's in these chapters where he talks about his family and how they die, but he really leaves out the part where it was revenge for him and his family killing Rhys's family.
Right. That's convenient omission. But I think Tamlin has seen at this point how compassionate and empathetic Feyre can be, and he uses that. I hate that I keep saying to woo her, but what else am I going to say?
He's courting her.
He's courting her. I mean, but he's also like
seducing her.
He's seducing her. I'm at a loss for words. That's just how furious I am at this point.
You're just straight up angry at Tamlin now.
I'm just straight up angry.
Are we regretting our fuck, marry, kill conversation from earlier?
No. I still think he would be a great fuck.
I agree. I want to do a callback earlier in this chapter when Tamlin explains to Feyre about the garden, and he talks about his mother and father being mates, and he speaks about mates with such reverence and respect. Also in this chapter, chapter before, he talks about how Lucien was expecting his mating bond to just click into place eventually. It's very foreshadowing for future events, for future books, and it's a breadcrumb that we could have mentioned later, but, mentioning it now.
I think what's also important to note on that topic is that as Tamlin is talking about the mating bond, Feyre she wonders if it's possible to have a mating bond between a fairy and a human.
I love that. The answer is yes, Feyre. It is possible.
No.
Yeah.
But it can't snap into place until they're both fairies.
But there was a bond enough that she doesn't die.
Yes, there is a bond enough.
But it just doesn't snap.
It doesn't snap.
It doesn't, but it...
What's a weak snap?
A little weak snap.
It's ASMR. So Feyre's figuring out who she is. She's starting to feel comfortable. She's allowing herself to paint. But every time Tamlin leaves or is upset, has a bad day, Feyre can't paint anymore.
He himself, his energy and everything about him now has such a direct impact in Feyre's life.
On page 169, it reads, but there were days when Tamlin was called away to face the latest threat to his borders, and even painting couldn't distract me until he returned.
I get it. Like, if our partner's having a bad day, we feel bad for him. But when you don't have anything in your life going on for you, because she doesn't, it becomes all consuming.
So she's balancing the desire to paint, the bad days with Tamlin or when he's gone. And then out of nowhere, she feels guilty about her family.
I'm so angry about that. Do you want to read the quote and then I go into my anger?
So on page 179, Feyre says to Tamlin, I don't know why I feel so tremendously ashamed of myself for leaving them. Why it feels so selfish and horrible to paint. I shouldn't feel that way, should I? I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it.
I love that we're just mocking her. Here's my quote. No one would remember me back home. I was as good as dead to them. And Tamlin, he had let me forget them. I had a feeling the first time I read this and all the times afterwards and every time I come to this, it's such a quick transition. Feyre is in the middle of this literally fairy dream world land and living her best life, embracing it. And then I think the trigger was, oh, it's going to be warm back home. And, maybe that's as natural as it would happen where you have one little thought and it sends you in a spiral. Lord, I know that happens, but it feels like lazy writing.
I think you described it to me separately as whiplash. It does feel like it comes out of nowhere. And I could see if I was the writer being like, oh, it might not be realistic that Feyre has never thought about her family, so maybe I need to throw in an instance of her thinking about her family.
For me, it feels like from a writer's point of view that the scene that happens after this when Feyre's upset and Tamlin comes and talks about her human joy, that's a scene that Sarah J. Maas knew she needed to get to.
Mm-hmm. And she had to get there somehow.
And I'm not saying that makes it a bad book or a bad author. We all have these moments, but sometimes you need to get from A to C, and B is just sometimes a very scribbled in letter.
What I do find interesting about this is that when Tamlin comes and finds her after she's had this emotional roller coaster, she's in the moonlit rose garden. Mm-hmm. Again, Rhys is there.
The moonlit
garden.
So Feyre is very upset and Tamlin's trying to comfort her. And he says, if it grieves you, then it grieves me. And when she says, why? The book says, he lifted my bleeding hand to his mouth and kissed my palm, as if that was answer enough. He's not providing her answers. He's not providing her any confirmation of his own feelings, really. He's just kind of... He's not providing any kind of information. And when Feyre pushes him a little bit more and they talk about this human joy, he says, don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy. Tucks the rose I pluck behind my ear.
Tamlin remarks that human joy is fascinating. And the first thing I thought of when I read that is that he thinks it's a toy. And this idea of human joy, as well as the way they age and how they experience time, are all factors that separate him from her. To be specific, Tamlin says, because your human joy fascinates me, the way you experience things in your lifespan so wildly and deeply and all at once is entrancing. I'm drawn to it, even when I know I shouldn't be, even when I try not to be. I mean, I guess every girl wants that angsty declaration, but really, he's holding her at arm's length. And what he's really saying in that moment is that he thinks he, as Faye, is superior to her as human. But she's this temptation that he can't give in to.
Why is this such a trope of guys who are attracted to you saying that they shouldn't be attracted to you? That's the last thing I want to hear is, I am attracted to you, but I shouldn't be. It's a lady boner killer.
But it also gives ladies boners.
I know. It would for me too. I'm not saying it's right.
I've experienced it myself. Why do we fall into this trap?
So I have here my notes of first off, your joy fascinates me isn't a compliment or isn't even a reason. It makes her a toy. It makes her an object. Second, telling her that he shouldn't be interested in her, it's like giving me some serious pick-me behavior. What he's doing is he's somewhat shifting the narrative to make himself look like a victim, as if he's the one who's struggling and he shouldn't be interested in her, but she's just standing there and, oh, I want that so bad and life is so hard for me, but I shouldn't want you. Even when this is a romantic moment, the conversation is still being shaped around his want and desire and his power over her.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think you're right. By doing that, he's avoiding being the one professing love, and he is manipulating her into being the one that professes it.
He's putting the responsibility of the relationship, of everything. In relationships, there's always that power dynamic, and not just romantic, but in any. And by saying you are now the one in charge of this romantic stuff, because I wouldn't even be interested in you if it wasn't for my fascination with you.
But then he goes and kisses her anyway.
Her cheek. I mean, we haven't gotten full kiss just yet.
But still.
It's a sexy cheek kiss, I'm not going to lie.
As you pointed out, Tamlin tries to distract her with physical touch, which just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
And so the following day, she flees for the sanctuary of the woods for some fresh air and to study the light and colors. I brought my bow and arrows along with the jeweled hunting knife that Lucien had given me. She recognizes that she's forgotten about her family. So to make up for that, she's going to allow herself to go enjoy colors, but she's also going to take the huntress with her. She's trying to strike a balance between all the different parts of herself, which I think is important. And I think we're going to see that in a couple different ways coming up. What you might have noticed up until this point is that Feyre isn't really in control of the situation.
Feyre's autobiography. Wasn't really in control of the situation. Like, name a point where she was ever in control. Poor Feyre. Isaac.
Yeah, I think Isaac was the last time she was in control. I like to think she was on top.
She was 100% on top the entire time.
So one thing we didn't talk about in chapter 19 is the adder and the presence of the adder. And I'm kind of okay with it because that's in the breadcrumb section.
It's plot mixed with breadcrumbs. It doesn't really do anything when we're doing a literary analysis or in-depth look at things at this point. It's more foreshadowing, which we will get more into.
As we approach chapter 20 and we approach Calanmai.
As I keep saying this at the beginning, now when the sex begins.
I mean, sex is everywhere, but now sex.
But now.
This is adult sex now. I'm sorry.
What was that? No, we're keeping this. We're editing that in.
Oh, man. So Feyre, as Feyre does, goes to paint in order to cope with the adder and the revelations of the adder. When that doesn't bring her comfort, she tries to gain control again by helping Ellis with food prep for Calanmai. However, when it comes to Calanmai, everyone and the food disappears. I think this is important because as much as Feyre seeks to be helpful, she just can't be in control of anything and nobody's giving her information.
It's so funny. Like, I feel like each episode we keep saying the same thing over and over. But that's because, like, the same thing keeps happening over and over. Like, No one gives Feyre information on anything, even though her life depends on all of the information.
We kind of just accept it. We just kind of go with it. We even find out while Feyre's venturing out into Calanmai that she's glamored so that the fairies can't view her properly. Instead of the other way around, instead of her not being able to see the fairies. Once again, knowledge is being withheld from her and limits her power.
Not just knowledge, but consent. She references that moment as with her family, how her family's memory had been tampered with. And that was another issue of consent. She never consented to her family's memory being tampered. And she likens the other Fae not being able to see her or her really seeing them as that same thing of like, no one asked me about this. The power dynamic here and the lack of consent is really big. And what's interesting is later on, we'll talk about it, Feyre does get shocked at the idea of a sexual interaction within the lack of consent there. And she's a little thrown off by that concept. But in this instance, when it's actually happening to her, granted in a non-sexual way, she doesn't really blink twice at it.
Feyre is even commanded by Tamlin to go seclude herself because Calanmai is so dangerous. And she obeys him, but she forgets to eat by doing so.
Which is interesting because you've always talked about the power dynamic of food.
She's giving him her power and like forgetting to take power back for herself. It's just very, very frustrating. What I would like to note out, Jack, you're about to talk about the drum beats. When Feyre first hears the drum beats of Calanmai, she approaches the outside, even though she knows she's not supposed to go there. And she stops at the threshold.
Yep.
And she only goes inside because Tamlin tells her to. And I think that's really important.
I think that's also important, but not the importance that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, but I actually really liked the threshold comment because I didn't even realize it. Like every threshold you pointed out, I'm always like, you're right. That's happened.
Yeah. So in this context, for me, the threshold is her connection to Rhysand. And
because she's about to go meet him.
And Tamlin is ordering her to stay behind. And so she listens to Tamlin, she chooses Tamlin and goes back inside and secludes herself.
Until she chooses Rhysand because of these sexy drum beats. Before Feyre even realizes what Calanmai is even about, there's so much sexual tension at the top of this, where on page 183, she says, the drum beats came from far away. They were deep, probing. A single beat echoed by two responding calls, summoning. It's guttural. It's, your core. Like she talked about her core in here quite often, and it's hot as hell. But this is already sexual for Feyre, and she has an instinct to know what it is, but she's also sensing magic in the air, and she's being drawn to it. In our previous readings, not looking into it, we think, it's just a very magical night. Of course, she's going to be drawn to it. Or she's drawn to it because she felt Rhys there.
Dun, dun, dun.
Bum, bum, bum. So I mentioned in previous episodes that the way that the men dress is pretty important. It tells a lot about the man. So when Tamlin is about to go to his adventures, he's described as he was shirtless with only a baldric across his muscled chest. The pommel of his sword glinted golden in the dying sunlight, and the feather top of the arrows were stained red as they poked above his broad shoulders. The warrior incarnate. Again, like, stop calling him a warrior. He's not a warrior. He's never fought in a war. And I also want to point out that the way that he's dressed is more ridiculous in one way. If you remember, the ceremony requires him to hunt a stag because this Fey male needs a baldric, needs a sword and bow and arrows to go kill a horse. Like, he can go and cut it down himself. It's just the overplay of masculinity, the overplay of like man in charge, alpha male is just ridiculous. And I'm going to hop over to when we see Rhysand and the way that he's described. And granted, this doesn't come until in the next chapter when it's described, but for the sake of this, he is described almost in like a really an opposite way of Tamlin. He's sophisticated. His clothes are all black, all finely made, were cut close enough to his body that I could see how magnificent he was, as if he'd been modeled from the night itself. It's the absolute opposite of Tamlin, and yet Rhysand is the warrior. Rhysand was the person who fought in the war and has that knowledge and has those scars, but he doesn't pretend to be anything he's not, while Tamlin is the ultimate poser.
I totally see what you're saying. And as we get to know Rhysand, he's always very casual, laid back, swagger. Tamlin is very much putting on airs. And
Always.
And granted, he's part of a ritual, and this is Spring Court's big ritual. But at the same time,
do you need to be shirtless with a sword for that ritual? Not really.
I can't get over the description of the golden pommel of his sword glinted in the dying sunlight. I mean, that's just so phallic.
I know.
That's all I kept thinking when you were reading it.
The pommel of his sword glinted. No, yeah, it is. It's like, it's very phallic, and it's also pretty, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's gold and it glinted. Oh, okay. Like you said, it's extremely phallic. It's extremely sexual because it's all playing into this big rite that happens in this cave where Tamlin has to have sex with a maiden. That's how they get magic, is with him boning, because he has magical boning powers. But the way that they talk about where they have sex is in a cave, which is interesting because there's just like pelts on the ground. I thought it was very reminiscent of Under the Mountain. Right? Because caves are in a mountain.
And Amarantha bones a lot.
In the mountain. And and what does Amarantha want? She wants to bone Tamlin.
Yep.
But, you know, he likes to bone in a cave. So it was just like an interesting reference callback between the two.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, you know, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile.
With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
As we progress into chapter 21, now that Feyre has met Rhys, Feyre still isn't in control. Feyre is viewed again as prey in Rhys's presence. He was still smiling at me, a predator sizing up prey. Her human senses flag him as dangerous, and rightly so, which is interesting then that he's described as the most beautiful man she's ever seen, which I know you're going to talk about in a second. But you don't expect that. Like, that's you. Yeah. I don't know about you, but the first time I heard that, I was like, that's wrong.
It felt wrong for her to say that about another person.
Yep.
I was like, how can you think about that with anyone else?
Yep.
You know what? I was also, because I was so determined that there was like a reference into the second book that was not there. But what I did do is I went back and reread Rhysand's interpretation of their first meeting. Rhysand was just so excited to see Feyre. Like, he was just like, whoa, this human, she's here. Oh my God. Like, I'm so excited. And then here's Feyre. He's smiling at me like a predator sizing up his prey. No, he was just excited. He was just like, it's like, it really does remind us of like, this is all Feyre's interpretation. Like, she sees herself as a prey because we know what's happening in his brain. We find out later he actually isn't sizing her up as prey. So that's still her viewing herself as weak.
She also is in an unsafe situation, and she tries to lie her way out of the situation and saying her friends are going to get refreshment. But because no one's given her any information about tonight, Rhys catches that lie real fast, and she is still powerless. And then when Lucien comes and takes her away from Rhys because she's in danger, without further word, he slung me over his shoulder as if I were a sack of potatoes. I just love that because it's so unsexy. But going back to Rhys.
So unsexy to back to the most sexy. When Feyre meets Rhysand, Sarah J. Maas does a wonderful thing here where Feyre has been mostly surrounded by Fae who have been masked. And if they're not masked, then they don't really look human. And on page 189, Feyre says, "It had been so long since I'd seen a bare face that even looked vaguely human." And who's the first person that she sees for real? It's Rhysand. Come on. Sarah knows what she's doing. Everything about him, her body's reacting to. His voice was a lover's purr that sent shivers through me, caressing every muscle and bone and nerve. Like you said, like the first time reading this, it definitely felt like she was cheating on Tamlin.
Yeah.
I was like, stop having shivers. This isn't allowed. He comes off as a predator, as this creepy, scary, hot guy who's coming after her. But in actuality, he is probably the most honest character that Feyre has met at this point. He does not lie to her. When she asks about what he's doing out there, he says, because all the monsters have been let out of their cages tonight, no matter what court they belong to. So I may roam wherever I wish until dawn. This is the most information, like honest information, Feyre has received from a Fae in a really long time. And she's immediately perceiving all this as a threat and danger.
Talk about brainwashing. Yeah. That she's just become so accustomed to what breadcrumbs she has been given.
Yep.
Or as Jack calls, love crumbs.
Love crumbs. So even now that I've hyped up saying that everyone lies to Feyre, I'm now going to transition to the one other person who decides to tell the truth. Lucien, at this point, has taken Feyre and is about to tell her some, like, what everyone should have told her, what the Great Rite is about. Tamlin is about to be possessed by a great and terrible magic, and that he's going to lose control, and that's just something we're supposed to all be okay with, but all right. He's going to go around and he's going to smell someone and he's going to bone them. So he explains to Feyre why she was supposed to stay in her room, which would have been great beforehand. And he says on page 194, because he would have smelled you and claimed you, and I don't think you would have liked it. Tonight is not for lovemaking. As if Feyre wants lovemaking. Like, that's a hell of an assumption for Lucien to make.
She's never made love.
She's never made love once. Like, you're telling me her and Isaac made sweet, passionate love? No, like, Feyre fucks, man. So she's capable of deciding if she wants to screw Tamlin in a cave or not. And would she have said yes? Maybe yes or no. Honestly, she's got a little freak in her. I think maybe she would have. But to assume that it's love, that she wants lovemaking, and to assume that she wouldn't be interested, and to also like phrase it as like, we're trying to save you from being victimized by taking away your decision and your control.
Feyre does recognize, like when she thinks about this, she says, it made me sick, the thought of Tamlin forcing me, that magic could strip away any sense of self, of right or wrong. But hearing that some feral part of him wanted me, my breath was painful.
She was into it.
She was into it. And it's...
I mean, I'd be into it too. Like, oh no, he's a rage monster, but he wants me? Oh my God.
Yeah, ravish me. Tamlin even backs this up when he encounters her in the hallway. He says about the woman he did take, she asked me not to be gentle with her either. I would have been gentle with you, though. I would have had you moaning my name throughout it all, and I would have taken a very, very long time, Feyre.
Oh.
But is that what she actually wants? Like, did you ask her what she wanted?
I don't know. No, that's not what she wants. But when you say it like that, sure. Like...
I mean, just as like no one's giving Feyre information, no one's asking Feyre what she actually wants. They're just making assumptions. I think it makes sense at this point that Feyre has no control over anything, and maybe she wants control. Maybe. And what does she do? She goes back to the manor and she eats her feelings. Once again, she's trying to reclaim, or at least in my view, she's trying to reclaim her power. So she goes and she just eats a ton of stuff. I made it to the empty kitchen, gobbled down half a loaf of bread, an apple, and a lemon tart. I nibbled on a chocolate cookie as I walked to my little painting room. I needed to get some of the furious images out of my mind, even if I had to paint by candlelight.
I've never related to Feyre more than in that moment eating my feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Half a loaf of bread, an apple, a lemon tart, and chocolate chip cookies. Like that, girl, that is my night. Let's do this.
I mean, that was me in the pandemic. I would eat a loaf of bread in a day.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time.
It was good times. Oh, sorry. Feyre's in the pandemic too. She thinks it's a blight. Feyre's in her own pandemic. She has to eat her loaf of bread. It's okay, Feyre.
This is recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic, people, just in case you didn't know.
If they're like, people are listening to this in 50 years in the future.
So when Tamlin comes and finds her, control goes out the window. Even the cookie she was nibbling on dropped.
That's not cool.
As he grabs her wrists. She drops the cookie because he grabs her.
That's an aggressive
It's very
grab
aggressive.
that like any person holding a cookie, right? An emotional person holding a cookie, you grab at them and they drop their cookie, that's an aggressive grab.
I mean, let's be honest. Everything about this is assault.
Assault on her.
Assault on
her cookie.
Yeah.
Assault on my cookie.
The poor cookies. Although he didn't pierce my flesh, he bit me rather to keep me pinned. It's a control thing.
I mean, it's animalistic. It's control. He's keeping her pinned and marking her.
Oh, yeah. Because she has a bruise later.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, but that's what he's doing. He's like, I'm pinning you. I'm marking you. Mine.
Again, did he ask her if she wanted that?
No. She probably would have said yes, though. So just ask.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt to ask.
It doesn't hurt to ask because she would have said yes. Feyre is into it. Like, she, even like in this moment, right? This entire process where she's woken up because she's pissed off because she woke up to Tamlin having an orgasm. Like his actual orgasm wakes her up, which cracks me up. Like, cause she could feel it all throughout the house and everything. So she's already in a mood and mad because, you know, he's just screwed another girl.
Wait, can you read the quote? Cause I never really noticed this until you pointed it out.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, it's on page 194. I awoke the moment the drums stopped. A shuddering silence went through the house, and the hair on my arms arose as the magic swept past me. I thought about the probable source and blushed.
Wow.
Like, imagine the guy you like has an orgasm with another woman and that's what wakes you up.
It sounds like a nightmare to me.
Honestly, the fact that she handled it this well is,
oh, yeah, she just blushed?
Yeah, she just blushed. I'd be like, cool, I'm going to destroy your bedroom now. Not into that. So that's what like leads her in the kitchen, which leads her with Tamlin, which leads them into the hallway, which leads them to this like very intense moment where he's even throwing the fact that he just slept with someone else in her face, but somehow using it as an excuse to why Feyre did this to him. Tamlin saying, "You drove me mad. I searched for you. You weren't there." He's building up his case as to like why he did what he did. Because, if Feyre was there, then he wouldn't have had to sleep with someone else. And you made the quote about how she asked to not be gentle. And all of this is a power play. All of this is to make Feyre feel bad that he slept with someone else. Even with all of that, because it's still somehow sexy. And the second that Tamlin's not mocking her or throwing this in her face, and the second that she moans, he backs off. And that is so uncool because, in literature, there's always been this history of the mystery and the history of the female orgasm, right? The term hysteria and, being overly passionate. Like, women could not be sexual beings. In literature, this is a very common theme. Just to give an example, I'm going to throw back to when I was in college and when I was doing my master's. An example of how women's sexualization can be used against them. If you look at like vampires, like female vampires, how they're overly sexual and they were always like these like demonic crazy women versus Twilight, where Bella was like this virginal vampire. Like one's in control, one's not in control. So just saying that there's a history between the female orgasm and literature, and the fact that her pleasure is what causes Tamlin to stop speaks volumes on Tamlin.
I wonder to what extent is it because A, that wasn't in the plan, B, he isn't in control. He didn't realize he could do that.
I think he didn't want her to like it.
Yeah. He wanted to punish her.
Yeah. But then she was into it.
And then that wasn't okay.
Which is so messed up.
It is messed up. And you know what? I have to say, hand it to Feyre. This is the first time that she actually stands up for herself. And she sees Tamlin as lesser than her.
She hits him, right?
She hits him. She slaps him. And she says, "Don't tell me what to do." I breathed, my palm stinging. "And don't bite me like some enraged beast."
But do, because that's what she wants.
But do, because it's hot. And yet, despite standing up for herself, Feyre still can't be in control, people.
No, not at all.
So the next day, chapter 22, is the aftermath of Calanmai. And Feyre goes into the dining room and is a good sport, and she's teasing Tamlin. And as she does so, she serves herself food and she eats. But as they fight, he also eats. Mm-hmm. And she accuses him of treating her like prey. As I'm reading this, because obviously my brain is constantly looking at where's the food, who's eating the food, who's serving the food. He's still the one in control. He's still eating while she's eating. And so he hasn't backed off from his position of power yet. And Feyre tries to take control of the situation by turning Lucian's attention to how Tamlin assaulted her, because that's her backup plan at this point.
And this whole entire situation at this breakfast table, it's so annoying. There's zero accountability. Tamlin cannot be bothered with how he treated Feyre. He even says, if Feyre can't be bothered to listen to orders, then I can't be held accountable for the consequences. Like, okay, victim blaming much? Like, what the hell is that? He doesn't feel guilt. He doesn't feel regret. If anything, it's her fault. And, she should have known better. His attitude makes Feyre so uncomfortable that she has to end up leaving the breakfast table because of that. But despite him being such a dick about everything, the forgiveness aspect happened so quickly. It is one paragraph, only 4 sentences. And you know what? I actually don't think it's lazy writing. I'm going to say it's smart writing because it shows just how much Feyre is willing to dismiss his actions and is willing to be flippant about it and just move on and say, okay, I'm okay. Let's move on. I'm on board. Whatever you want.
And as a reader, we're also okay with it because this is how Feyre treats everything with Tamlin. She just dismisses the red flags. What I find even more fascinating is that after they've made up, Tamlin serves Feyre food and she eats until she's nearly bursting.
Yep.
And he overpowers her with this food and wine combination that makes Feyre do things she wouldn't normally do, which we know later in the chapter is her showing Tamlin art. The quote specifically that I want to bring up is, so she's shown Tamlin her art, and then all of a sudden she's ashamed. And she says, I backed away a step, unable to bear watching him look at it, wishing I hadn't brought him in here, blaming it on the wine I'd had at dinner. It's just so fascinating to me that she still can't get control. The food is always her downfall.
The foods are downfall. The paintings are downfall.
Feyre's also to blame in some way. Not that I'm blaming her, but she allows simple things like flowers after a fight to win her over.
What's your note here? Not even red flowers. Like
Yeah. So the quote is, he even brought me a bouquet of white roses from his parents' garden.
Are you mad that they're not red?
No, I'm mad they're not red. They're not pink. It's not romantic at all.
White flowers?
It's like what you give at a funeral.
No, it's not. Is it?
White? Anything white to me. Are white roses an apology? I don't know. I should have looked that up.
Thing? Is that like an everything thing?
When you send sympathy flowers, you send white flowers.
Seriously? Oh.
I mean,
I've been leading on a lot of people.
Yeah, good luck transitioning to how Feyre dresses.
No, I got it. I got you. I'm actually going to keep all this part in.
Okay.
So Feyre stepped into this whole new Feyre. She is everything that she's been kind of building herself up to be, right? She eats food now until she bursts. She paints now. She wears dresses now. And that's a huge freaking step for her to wear a dress. And everyone makes a big deal about it. Even Alice and Lucien and Tamlin, and everyone's like, whoa. And even Feyre recognizes that she looks pretty and even considers it feminine. She's stepped into a role that she's wanted to step into because it shows security and it shows safety, and her identity is now her own. And I'm going to hijack your quote, but it's also, I wanted it too. I dare say that some kind of light had crept into my eyes, not my mother's eyes, not Nesta's eyes, mine.
What I love about this is we've come full circle compared to earlier in the book when she first arrives in Prythian. She only ever saw her mother or Nesta when she looked at herself, and now she's starting to see herself. Mm-hmm. We realize at this point that she's developed an identity, and she's learning to balance who she is, who all her selves have been and will be. We see that, as you pointed out, she wears dresses to dinner and trousers during the day. I wonder, though, is this who she wants to be, or is this who Tamlin wants her to be?
I'm going to say it because I know what happens in the future with her. Both. Feyre has always wanted to play with dresses. You know, she wants this feminine side to her, but Feyre also recognizes that that's not all of her, that she has a lot of other sides to her. Tamlin hasn't embraced those other sides, so it would make sense why it's so important for her to play up this feminine side more.
What I found really interesting about this moment, and I didn't catch it until recently, is so Feyre's explaining the desire to wear a dress and wear trousers as well. She's explaining it to Alice, and Alice responds with, I see. Good that you aren't losing your common sense entirely. And I know that Alice is teasing her at this point, but it's also true.
Yeah. Feyre has to quite literally wear the pants in this entire book.
And if you think about all the things that she's going to go through for books to come, she needs to wear those trousers. But when she does wear a dress is probably among the only times I can recall that Tamlin actually compliments her for how she looks.
Shut up, really?
I think so.
What?
So when she walks into the dining room with a dress for the first time, Lucien very quickly excuses himself, and then Tamlin comments that she's beautiful. Even though she's charmed by this, she ignores the fact that he gets jealous when
he looks at the painting of her and Isaac making love. Well, even though he just boned another girl.
And she didn't get jealous.
No, she handled it like a champ.
Yeah, she did.
She ate her feelings like you're supposed to.
As we all do.
As we all do. And she just did one better and didn't go trash his room or trash a painting that she drew of him.
Going back to paintings, can we also talk about the fact that she gives Tamlin the painting of the Starlight Pool? And he says, no, I want the picture of the woods.
I want the one of you sad and depressed.
It's not just that. It's also like he's playing it off as if they have this similarity, right?
Yeah.
That they both come from nothing, or they, that's a Star Wars reference. Or, that they just both have dark pasts.
I know what you're leading to, but in order, like the way that he leads to the same thing, he's like, I have had so many lovers. My past is so dark. I have boned so many noble women. You don't even know. In order for him to be like, we're similar.
Yeah. But even though he rejects this painting of his favorite place, I think inherently he knows it doesn't belong to him.
Yeah.
Because it belongs to Rhys.
Yep.
Because Rhys is starlight and moonlight and all those beautiful things that Feyre loves.
Feyre giving art to Tamlin gives me real I wrote a song about you vibes.
Oh, yeah.
It's cringy. Like the first time I read it, and every once in a while it's like, I want to show you something. And it's like her paintings. And it's just like, oh, no, please don't look at it. No, thank you.
You know, it's interesting because other than hunting, it's the only thing she can do.
I mean, as far as we know, all of TikTok thinks that she's a bad painter.
Oh, that's true. That's
They're
fair.
probably all stick figures.
But it's still all that she can do, right?
Yeah,
it's her only way of saying thank you. So I don't want to poo-poo on it.
No, it's her love language. It just, I just feel uncomfortable with it personally. But no, you're doing great, honey, sweetie, Feyre. Keep going.
Yeah. So just like Tamlin, you're reminding us that Feyre is inferior.
Oh, shit. I'm Tamlin.
You're Tamlin.
Oh, damn.
This is seen several different ways. I am jumping around in the chapter, so I apologize. So when Feyre puts on her dress, she's unable to act on her instincts because Fae have superior instincts. She contemplated bolting upstairs and changing into a tunic and pants, but I knew they'd already heard me or smelled me or used whatever heightened sense they had to detect my presence. As you've mentioned, Feyre's lesser than Tamlin's past lovers because, they're females of noble birth, warriors, princesses, blah, 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 blah. And then she offers to help Tamlin, but he views her as powerless and therefore says no.
This is where the part, I believe, in the chapter towards the end where Feyre just asks him, please let me help you with this blight, with this curse, what's happening. She doesn't know it's a curse, so she says blight. Like, I want to help you. I can do it. I can help you. And he straight up tells her no, and that it's his burden, even though she literally can break the curse.
And there's something I want to say here, but it's in the breadcrumbs, so I will not say it.
Well, let's get into the breadcrumbs then.
All right.
This has been a Rhysand-centric breadcrumb area. On page 159, Feyre is attracted to the pond because of Starlight and her connection with Rhysand. Following in 183, she has a string tied to her gut. Feyre thinks it's the drums, but in actuality, it's for Rhysand. And additionally, Rhysand, his first words to Feyre, we think they're there to save her, but in actuality, it's him being so excited to see her, which we later find out in the next book.
It's adorable.
It's so cute.
Moving away from Rhysand, I don't know why you would, but we are going to. Page 180, we overhear the conversation with the Adder where we learn Tamlin's heart is stone, and the Adder is told to stay away from the cave in the path to the mountains, which we don't understand the relevance, but we'll learn later it's the path to under the mountain. Page 206, Tamlin claims Feyre can do nothing and she wouldn't survive even if she tried to help him. And it's ironic because he does nothing and she saves them all. The quote specifically, if you're wondering, is, "There's nothing I want you to do, nothing you can do, or anyone. It's my burden to bear. What I have to face, what I endure, Feyre, you would not survive."
But she does survive. She survives. She thrives. She saves your entire people, Tamlin. And my final breadcrumb is after Calanmai, when Tamlin corners Feyre in the hallway, she notes that he is covered in paint so that she can see where he had been touched. Just like Feyre will later be covered in paint underneath the mountain so that Rhysand can see where she's been touched.
Connection.
So let's kind of circle back to some of our questions that we asked before. How do these characters deal with responsibility and accountability? Well, we discussed what responsibility and accountability means. I think that we can accept that Tamlin fakes responsibility while absolutely lacking accountability. Feyre, on the other hand, absolutely feels responsible and accountable to everything.
And who wants control and who has control? Well, Jack and I had a little bit of a disagreement on this one. I think Feyre wants control. She just can't have it because Tamlin is dominating it. Whereas I think, Jack, you thought Feyre's just like, throw control to the wind. I was really
like,
care.
what? I'm like, what do we disagree on? Nothing, except for this one. You're right. I took this more as Feyre throwing, like you said, throwing caution to the wind. I think she talked to the cereal and she heard stay with the High Lord and she took that to heart and just kind of stopped caring. It was like, cool, whatever, take the control. I'm not into it anyway.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Woo! Or Lucian.
Or Lucian is not Jesus.
thank you again for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring chapters 23 through 28 of A Court of Thorns and Roses.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and to learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo.
Or find us on TikTok and Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.